reading from Luke, chapter 13, verses 6 through 9. Then he told this parable. A man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came looking for fruit on it and found none. So he said to the man working the vineyard, "See here, for 3 years I have come looking for fruit on this fig tree, and still I find none. Cut it down. Why should it be wasting the soil?" He replied, "Sir, let it alone for 1 more year, until I dig around it and put manure on it. If it bears fruit next year, well and good. But if not, you can cut it down."
There's an old proverb that says you can judge a tree by the fruit it produces. And on the surface, that seems simple enough. I mean, peach trees do not produce oranges. Apple trees will never grow lemons. Walnuts do not fall from pine trees. The fruit of a tree invariably reveals the kind of tree it is. But the proverb, of course, isn't really about botany. It speaks to the condition of the human soul. Over time, what grows out of our lives reveals the deeper truth about what is taking root within us. The character we're forming, the commitments we're nurturing, the values quietly shaping our choices. Just as the fruit discloses the health of a tree, the outer patterns of our lives reveal the inner life from which they grow. Compassion, for example, tends to grow in hearts that have learned mercy. Generosity flourishes in people who trust that there's enough to share. Humility takes root in those who remember they're not the center of the story. Justice blooms in those who refuse to look away from the suffering of others. In other words, the fruit we bear in the world reveals the life we are cultivating within, which is why Jesus so often used trees and fruit as metaphors for faith. He says, "No good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit." Elsewhere, he says, "Beware of false prophets. You will know them by their fruits." In John, he says, "I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit." Jesus understood that our inner life, our character, the depth of our faith, is ultimately revealed in the consistent outcomes of our lives. Our actions, our habits, the way we treat others, the impact we leave behind. Because sooner or later, the fruit tells the truth about the tree. And so Jesus tells this unsettling parable about a fig tree that's neither growing good fruit nor bad fruit, but no fruit at all. And at first glance, this fig tree seems ordinary enough. It's planted in good soil. It's been given proper care. It's even producing leaves like all the other fig trees. But then the landowner comes looking for fruit on the tree, and there is none. Year after year, it's been growing beautiful, abundant leaves, but no figs. In the Mediterranean world, fig trees produce early buds before their full leaves appear. These buds are edible, even though they're not yet mature fruit. So if a tree is leafy, it should already be producing something. Leaves signal promise and potential and vitality. And this tree in the story has plenty of leaves. By all appearances, this tree is doing everything a fig tree should do. But then the landowner comes looking for fruit, and there is none. Not the first year, not the second, not even the third, just leaves. The landowner suspects something isn't right about this tree. Healthy fig trees normally produce figs in their first year, sometimes even within the first 6 months. Waiting 3 years has been more than generous. Giving it another year would just be pointless. And so he tells the gardener, cut it down. It's just taking up space and resources. And the order to cut down the tree seems a bit harsh. Isn't there enough dirt in the world to go around here? Is it really necessary to act so decisively? But fig trees They absorb an unusual amount of nutrients and water. This unproductive tree is actually putting the future of the entire vineyard at risk. The owner knows you can judge a tree by the fruit it produces, and this tree has produced none. Cut it down, he says matter of factly. What we have here is a story not about a good tree or a bad tree, but a tree that simply isn't doing what a fig tree is made to do. It's deceptive because it has plenty of leaves. It looks very much alive. It appears to have all the characteristics of a healthy tree. But when you draw near, you discover the promise is hollow. There's beauty, but nothing that sustains. There is the outward appearance of vitality, but no fruit to offer a hungry world. It signals life while withholding what life is meant to give. In the Bible, the fig tree is a national symbol of Israel. It represents Israel's spiritual and physical and political health. The fig tree is a barometer for national well-being. A flourishing fig tree signals vitality and faithfulness to God's covenant. A barren tree signifies misalignment with God's purposes in the world. Perhaps the fig tree is to Israel what the bald eagle is to the United States, a national symbol, an image people immediately recognize as representing the life and character of the whole nation. So imagine what it would mean to see a bald eagle that couldn't fly, a bald eagle that had lost the strength of its wings, that was majestic in appearance, but incapable of doing the very thing it was created to do. Something about that image would feel deeply unsettling. The symbol would no longer match the ideal. And that's the unsettling edge to this parable. It turns out that it was never about gardening at all. Jesus is doing what the ancient prophets always did. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Amos, Micah. He was saying out loud what everyone already knows, but no one wants to name. He's holding up a mirror to the moral and spiritual life of his people. And he's suggesting that something essential is missing, something much deeper than the appearance of things. Well, sure, the tree of Israel has plenty of leaves. The temple is stunning. The sacrifices are offered on schedule. The tithes are paid. The Sabbath is kept. The prayers are recited. By every visible measure, the covenant is being honored by the people. The branches are full of leaves. But God is walking through the vineyard, moving past the appearance of things, looking for something else entirely, looking for justice in the courts, mercy toward the stranger, bread for the hungry, dignity for the poor. God is looking for all of that and finding mostly leaves. From a distance, any tree can look vibrant and alive, successful. But the real question is, what happens when God draws near to take a deeper look? Is there fruit there? Is there something that feeds, something that heals, something that sets people free? Because in God's economy, the measure of a life is not how full the branches look. The measure is whether the tree is feeding the world. And so this parable asks us, what about the tree that is our life? Beyond the leaves, is there fruit to feed a hungry world? Just when it seems completely justifiable here to cut down this unproductive fig tree, something completely unexpected happens in the parable. Before the landowner can sharpen the axe, another voice enters the story. Not the landowner's voice, but the voice of the gardener, the one who's been tending this tree all along, who knows it most intimately, who has turned its soil and cleared its roots and watched it season after season with something that looks a lot like hope. The gardener, he doesn't argue with the verdict. He doesn't dispute the diagnosis. He doesn't tell the landowner that he's wrong to be disappointed, or that 3 years is too soon to judge, or that the tree deserves at least a little more credit for all of its leaves. He simply says, not yet. He says, give it 1 more year. Let me work with it. Let me dig around its roots, break up the hardened ground, give it something it hasn't had. And if it still bears no fruit after that, then yes, we'll cut it down. It's a small moment. It's easy to miss. Just a gardener asking for a little more time. But in that small moment, the entire parable turns. Because the gardener's plea is not just horticulture. It's the word of grace that enters the story. Hopeful and unhurried, refusing to give up on something that hasn't yet become what it's called to be. Babette's Feast was a 1987 Danish film. It was based on a short story by Isaac Dinesen. It's about this small, devout religious community on the remote coast of Denmark, a community that was founded by this strict Protestant minister who has long since died. His 2 aging daughters have kept this community alive, holding the prayer meetings and maintaining the rituals and preserving the forms of their father's faith. By all appearances, it looks like faithfulness. But when you look closer, this community is brittle and bitter. The members are consumed by old grievances, petty resentments, and unspoken wounds. The food they eat is a kind of gray gruel that sustains life, but gives no pleasure. Like that barren fig tree, they have all the outer leaves, but they lack the life-giving fruit. The people are starving for love and for joy, for freedom from the past. They just don't know how to ask for it or where to find it. And then Babette arrives, this French refugee who has lost everything, and she becomes their housekeeper. She lives among them quietly for years, asking nothing, until one day she wins a lottery, and she spends every franc of it preparing this extraordinary feast for the community in honor of their 100th anniversary. The community initially resolves to eat the meal without enjoying it. Pleasure, they believe, is worldly and suspect. But something happens around that table. Old bitterness softens and long-held grievances dissolve. People who had not truly seen each other in years start talking and listening to one another. A retired general who once loved one of the sisters speaks words of grace he'd never been able to say before. Something that had been dormant and closed off begins to open. Babette's feast does what years of religious piety had failed to do, feeding people in the places where they were most hungry. And at the end of the feast, when the daughters thank Babette, expressing their sorrow that she spent so much money, spent everything, in fact, Babette says something unforgettable. She says, "A great artist is never poor." She gave what she had, and in giving it, everything became fruit. It's a story about the difference between the appearance of faithfulness and the fruitfulness of it. And of course, the space between the two, where transformation and growth happen. It's a story that echoes the story of Jesus, about how real nourishment often arrives unexpectedly, even from outside the religious establishment, through someone the community never thought to look. Someone like Jesus himself, who also arrived from outside the establishment, offering a feast that the world didn't know it needed, and showing us how a single act of extravagant love can do what no amount of dutiful observance could ever accomplish. So how do we bear fruit? How do we move from the appearance of faithfulness to the thing itself? The answer, it turns out, may have less to do with trying harder and more to do with opening wider. In nature, a tree doesn't manufacture its own fruit. It cannot will the fruit to appear or pray it into existence or simply resolve to do better this season. The fruit comes through encounter. It comes through the work of pollinators, bees and butterflies, beetles and flies, unlikely and even unglamorous creatures that carry life from one place to another. The tree's only role is to be open, to flower outward rather than fold inward, to make itself available to the encounter. And maybe that's the invitation here, not to try harder at religion, but to turn outward, toward the people Jesus consistently moved toward. The stranger, the sick, the poor, the overlooked, the least of these, the ones outside the walls of our carefully manicured religious spaces. These are the pollinators. And it's in the encounter with them, it's in the act of seeing them and sitting with them and knowing and loving them, that something begins to stir in us that we could never have produced on our own. We don't make the fruit appear. We can't expect the fruit to be born overnight. But when we dare to open ourselves to the world Jesus loved, when we stop facing inward and start facing out, we discover that the fruit was already waiting to grow. It was just waiting for the encounter. So here's the invitation, not to be a better leaf producer, but to ask ourselves honestly, and let this question sit with you this week. Ask yourself, where is God walking in the vineyard of my life right now? What will God find on this tree that is my life? And then ask, who are the pollinators that I must seek out in this one more year that I've been given? Because there's always someone, a stranger, a neighbor, someone on the margins of our world, whose presence in your life, if you allowed it, would begin to call something forth in you that you couldn't produce on your own. The gardener is still at work in your life. The axe has not fallen. You have been given another year, this season, this ordinary week ahead of you, to open wide, to face encounter, and allow that encounter to happen. That's how the fruit comes. And this is how the tree feeds the world. That's how the space between appearance and fruitfulness becomes holy ground. Our takeaways for today: fruit reveals what leaves can hide. The gardener has not given up on you. The fruit comes through encounter.